Watching your husband pack your bags is painful, but the audience is worse, exhausted from a shift of 72 hours. I stood in my foyer while my father and sister flanked the man destroying my life. They looked at me with pity, buying every lie he sold. As the front door shut behind me, a terrifying but liberating truth set in. I was completely alone, which meant I no longer had to play by their rules. Hello to all the wonderful listeners of Violet Revenge Stories. I truly hope you are having a beautiful day. Unfortunately, YouTube has recently disabled monetization for our channel, leaving us without the budget needed to keep our operations running. If you enjoy today's story, please consider supporting us with just $1 so we can pay our hardworking team to sustain their livelihoods and continue bringing you these creations, which you can easily do by scanning the QR code on your screen or clicking the donation link in the description or pinned comment. My name is Taylor Evans. I am 34 years old, and this is exactly how my entire world collapsed into a carefully orchestrated exile. I had just spent the last 3 days and 3 nights locked in a windowless server room, neutralizing a massive data breach for Aegis Core Solutions. My eyes burned from staring at glowing monitors, and my bones felt heavy with an exhaustion so deep it bordered on physical numbness. Driving back to my home in Charlotte, North Carolina, all I wanted was the familiar comfort of my own bed, a hot shower, and perhaps a quiet dinner. I had worked tirelessly to build a secure, comfortable life for my family. Instead of a warm welcome, I walked directly into an ambush. The heavy front door swung open with a soft creak. The house was far too quiet, possessing the kind of dead silence that always precedes a devastating storm. As I stepped into the living room, my breath caught in my throat. There, sitting perfectly upright in the center of our imported rug, were 3 matching leather suitcases. My suitcases, they were fully packed, the zippers visibly strained against the fabric. I looked up from the luggage, my tired mind struggling to process the surreal scene unfolding in my own sanctuary. Marcus, my husband, sat on our velvet sofa. His head hung low, his shoulders slumped in a perfectly calculated posture of utter defeat and sorrow. But it was the 2 figures flanking him that truly anchored my feet to the hardwood floor. To his left sat my father, Arthur. To his right sat my younger sister, Chloe. Both of them were staring at me, and their eyes were entirely drained of the familial warmth I had known my whole life. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely a raspy whisper against the heavy silence of the room. Marcus let out a slow, trembling sigh. He looked up, his eyes pooling with masterful manufactured tears. "We cannot do this anymore. Taylor, I cannot do this anymore." I stepped forward, confusion clouding my exhausted brain. "Do what, Marcus? I just worked for over 72 hours straight to secure a massive corporate client. What are my bags doing out here in the middle of the floor?" My father shifted uncomfortably on the couch, resting a heavy hand on Marcus's shoulder. It was a gesture of solidarity that made my stomach churn with sudden nausea. "Sweetheart," my father began, his tone dripping with a gentle, agonizing pity that felt infinitely worse than a physical strike across the face. "Marcus has told us everything. We know about the paranoia. We know about the late-night outbursts and the severe emotional abuse you have been putting him through." I froze completely. The words hung in the air, grotesque and entirely disconnected from reality. "Emotional abuse, paranoia," I repeated, looking frantically from my father to my sister. "He is lying. I have been working. You know my job in cybersecurity is extremely demanding." Chloe leaned forward, her arms crossed tight against her chest, as if she needed a shield. She looked at me, not like a loving sister, but like a stranger observing a dangerous, unpredictable animal. "Stop it. Taylor, just stop. Marcus has shown us the messages. He has told us how the immense work pressure has completely fractured your mind. You are losing your grip on reality, and you are taking it out on the poor man who loves you." I stared at Marcus. He refused to meet my gaze, keeping his head bowed in a flawless display of the tortured, long-suffering spouse. The realization hit me with the force of a freight train. This was not a sudden, tragic misunderstanding. This was a meticulously staged execution of my character. He had systematically poisoned the well, feeding my own flesh and blood a fabricated narrative of my mental decline while I was buried in code and firewalls, completely oblivious to the knife resting against my back. "Please, Taylor," Chloe continued, her voice trembling with what sounded like genuine distress. "You need to accept psychological treatment. We cannot bear to watch your instability tear this family apart anymore. You need professional help, and until you get it, you absolutely cannot stay here." The air in the living room grew incredibly thin, suffocating me. My chest tightened as the sheer scale of his manipulation crystallized perfectly in my mind. If I screamed, I would be the hysterical wife. If I cried, I would be the emotionally unstable woman breaking down. Any defense I offered, any logical explanation I attempted to present, would only be weaponized against me as further undeniable proof of my supposed insanity. They had already held the secret trial, delivered the guilty verdict, and packed my bags for me. I closed my eyes for exactly 2 seconds. When I opened them, the blinding confusion was gone, replaced instantly by a cold, razor-sharp clarity. I did not shed a single tear. I did not raise my voice to argue. I simply turned my back on the people I loved most in the world. I walked straight past the neatly arranged suitcases. I had no use for whatever clothes Marcus had decided I was allowed to keep. Instead, I moved methodically into my home office. I grabbed my heavy black backpack, carefully sliding my military-grade encrypted work laptop inside. That machine was my absolute lifeline, my ultimate weapon, and my only truth. I walked back through the living room, feeling their eyes burning into my skin. The silence was absolute. My father looked down at his hands in shame. Chloe bit her lip, turning her face away toward the window. Marcus maintained his sorrowful act, though I could practically feel the quiet, arrogant triumph radiating from his relaxed posture. I opened the heavy wooden front door and stepped out into the humid Carolina evening without looking back. The heavy click of the lock engaging behind me was the undeniable sound of my old life ending. I drove directly to the quiet outskirts of the city and checked into a cheap, nondescript motel where a flickering neon sign buzzed loudly against the dark sky, sitting on the edge of a sagging, unfamiliar mattress. I stared at the blank wall ahead. They honestly thought they had discarded a broken, helpless woman. They had absolutely no idea they had just declared an uncompromising war against a digital ghost who was fully prepared to dismantle their entire reality piece by piece. The cramped motel room smelled intensely of stale cigarette smoke and industrial bleach. A single, flickering fluorescent bulb in the tiny bathroom cast long, jagged shadows across the peeling wallpaper. I sat cross-legged on the sagging mattress, resting my heavy encrypted laptop on my knees. The high-resolution screen illuminated the dark, confined space with a harsh, cold glow. My heart rate, which had been pounding erratically against my ribs since I walked out of my own front door, finally began to stabilize. In the physical world, I was a displaced, allegedly unstable woman. But here, illuminated by lines of complex code cascading down a terminal window, I was completely in my element. I needed to see exactly what Marcus was hiding behind his carefully constructed mask of the aggrieved husband. I initiated a secure shell connection, targeting the very network infrastructure I had meticulously wired for our home 3 years ago. Marcus had clumsily attempted to lock me out by changing the primary administrative credentials on the router. It was an adorable, amateurish effort. He forgot, or perhaps never truly understood, that I had built the entire digital architecture from the ground up. Within exactly 4 minutes and 20 seconds, I bypassed his basic firewall through a hidden back door I had installed for emergency maintenance, granting myself unrestricted root access to every device connected to our home network. His personal desktop computer was wide open. I deployed a packet sniffer and a hidden file directory scanner, slicing through his rudimentary encryption layers like a surgical scalpel through soft tissue. Almost immediately, a heavily encrypted partition flagged my attention. I cracked the password in under 60 seconds. The password was the exact date of our wedding anniversary, a sick irony that only sharpened my focus. The folder unpacked silently, spilling thousands of files across my screen. Private messages, audio clips, and high-resolution images were all categorized neatly. They belonged to Elena. A quick cross-reference of her digital footprint revealed she was a luxury real estate broker, sporting a perfectly manicured smile and a penchant for expensive silk. The chronological metadata embedded in the files painted a vivid picture of a deeply entrenched double life. As I dug deeper, cross-referencing the timestamps on his messages with his banking application logs, the first real shockwave hit me. I traced a series of outgoing wire transfers that did not align with our usual household or business expenses. Marcus had not merely been unfaithful. He had been systematically bleeding our finances dry. For the past 14 months, he had been silently liquidating assets from our joint investment portfolio to mask the heavy bleeding. He funneled the cash through a labyrinth of decentralized cryptocurrency exchanges, utilizing sophisticated tumbling services to obscure the ledger trails. But digital footprints never truly vanish if you know how to hunt them. I reconstructed the blockchain transactions, following the digital breadcrumbs all the way to a massive escrow account. He had siphoned hundreds of thousands of dollars to purchase a sprawling, secluded mansion entirely in Elena's name. The infidelity and the financial theft were devastating, but they were conventional crimes of a greedy spouse. What I found next in his deleted email archives made my blood turn to absolute ice. I uncovered a heavily guarded thread of communications between Marcus and a shady attorney operating out of a burner email address. Marcus was paying this man exorbitant fees to fabricate highly detailed clinical evaluations. They were actively drafting forged emails, meticulously designed to look exactly like official correspondence from my actual licensed therapist. I read the drafts line by line. They detailed fictitious episodes of severe manic depression, violent outbursts, and a complete detachment from reality. The ultimate objective was clearly spelled out in a drafted legal petition attached to the final email. Marcus was preparing to file an emergency motion for a medical power of attorney. He intended to use these forged documents to have a judge legally declare me mentally incompetent, placing him in absolute control of my healthcare and more importantly, my wealth. He was directly targeting my executive equity and my lucrative stock options at Aegis Core Solutions. He wanted to lock me in a psychiatric ward so he could legally steal my entire life's work while I was still breathing. A normal person might have screamed. They might have thrown the laptop against the cracked wall, called him in a hysterical rage, or rushed blindly to the police station. I did none of those things. I was a digital forensics expert, and I knew that raw emotion was the mortal enemy of flawless execution. My breathing remained perfectly steady. I simply opened a secure, cloud-based vault on a private server located offshore. I began scraping every single byte of data, every forged document, every cryptocurrency wallet address, every illicit photograph, and every incriminating text message. I organized them into an impenetrable, chronological chain of evidence, stamping each file with cryptographic hashes to guarantee their absolute authenticity in a court of law. I was no longer a victim crying in a cheap motel. I was the architect of his impending destruction, meticulously loading the weapon he had handed me. The deeper I dug into the financial wreckage, the more grotesque the architecture of Marcus's deceit became. It was no longer just about the stolen cash or the hidden real estate. Operating from the dim glow of my motel room, I breached the county property tax database. I needed to verify the status of the 50 acres of undeveloped commercial land my late mother had left to me. When the digital deed rendered on my screen, my blood ran completely cold. A massive commercial lien had been placed against the property just 3 months prior. Marcus had leveraged my family's inheritance, securing a business loan of $2 million. I pulled the scanned document of the mortgage agreement. There, sitting at the bottom of the page, was my signature. It was a masterful forgery, executed so perfectly that even I had to stare at it for a full minute to recognize the slight hesitation in the ink strokes. He had stolen my past to fund his fraudulent future. My phone vibrated violently against the cheap wooden nightstand, shattering the quiet focus of the room. It was Chloe. I answered, hoping for a sliver of reason. Instead, her voice hit my ear like a barrage of shattered glass. "How could you do this, Taylor?" she demanded, her tone trembling with a toxic mixture of anger and tears. "How could you sink this low?" "Chloe, what are you talking about?" I asked, keeping my voice dangerously level. "Do not play dumb with me," she snapped. "Marcus just had to withdraw $5,000 in cash to pay off a woman you assaulted outside a grocery store yesterday. The woman was threatening to press assault charges because you screamed at her and grabbed her by the throat. Completely unprovoked, Marcus begged her to settle quietly to keep you out of jail. He is ruining his own financial stability to protect you, and you do not even care." I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers hard against my temples. There was no woman. There was no assault. Yesterday, I was locked in a server room under constant corporate surveillance. This was another fabricated layer of his master plan. He was actively manufacturing a documented history of my violent, erratic behavior, complete with fake financial payoffs. He was ensuring that when he filed the psychiatric injunction, the judge would see a desperate husband trying to contain a dangerous wife. "Chloe, listen to me very carefully," I said. "Marcus is lying. I have proof." "Stop manipulating us," she screamed, her voice cracking. "Just get the help you need." The line went dead. I stared at the disconnected call screen. They were completely under his spell. I opened my tracking software. I had planted a silent location beacon on Marcus's phone months ago for emergency purposes. The map pinged his current location. He was not at home mourning his broken marriage. He was at the Grand Ballroom of the Beaumont Hotel in downtown Charlotte, attending the annual Metropolitan Charity Gala. I changed out of my stale clothes, pulled a simple black evening dress from my backpack, and drove downtown. I bypassed the main entrance, slipping through the bustling catering kitchen and blending seamlessly into the chaotic flow of waitstaff and event coordinators. Finding a shadowed alcove near the grand staircase, I opened my phone and synced it to the hidden servers I had set up. The ballroom was a sea of silk, diamonds, and forced smiles. My gaze swept the crowded floor and immediately locked onto a sight that made my chest cave in. My father, Arthur, stood near the center ice sculpture, looking incredibly proud in his tailored tuxedo. Standing right next to him, radiating false humility and charm, was Marcus, and hovering just a few feet away, sipping champagne and pretending to be a casual acquaintance, was Elena. I watched, paralyzed by a sickening wave of betrayal, as my father enthusiastically shook hands with two prominent venture capitalists, gesturing warmly toward Marcus. He was actively introducing the man who was bankrupting our family, elevating Marcus's reputation in the exact business circles my father had spent 40 years building. Arthur was completely oblivious, smiling brightly at the parasite draining his legacy. I needed more than just a visual confirmation of their audacity. I pulled out my modified tablet and scanned the hotel's wireless infrastructure. The security cameras operating in the VIP balcony sections were running on an outdated, unencrypted radio frequency protocol. It took me less than 3 minutes to intercept the transmission and mirror the live feeds directly onto my screen. I watched the digital monitors as Marcus and Elena discreetly slipped away from the main floor, retreating to a secluded, dimly lit corner of the upper mezzanine. The camera angle was perfect, but I needed sound. I pinged a smart speaker mounted on the wall directly above their heads, overriding its internal microphone to stream ambient audio to my earpiece. The audio feed crackled to life in my ear, sharp and devastatingly clear. "You have to admit, Elena," Marcus laughed, swirling his expensive bourbon. "The old man is incredibly useful. He just handed me the contacts for the entire regional supply chain. He practically begged me to take them." Elena giggled, a sharp, grating sound. "And the sister, is she still crying over the poor, deranged wife?" "Chloe is the easiest target of them all," Marcus sneered, his voice dripping with pure contempt. "I tell her Taylor is crazy, and she instantly writes the script in her own head. They are so eager to avoid a family scandal that they eat right out of my hand. They are doing all the heavy lifting for me. By the time I file the medical papers next week, Arthur and Chloe will probably offer to drive Taylor to the asylum themselves. They clinked their glasses together in a sickening toast to my family's profound stupidity. A searing, blinding rage threatened to tear its way out of my throat. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to march up those stairs, shatter that glass of bourbon across his smug face, and drag him down to the lobby for the world to see. But I forced my feet to remain anchored to the floor. Confrontation now would only give him the chaotic reaction he so desperately wanted. I recorded every second of the audio, encrypting the file and immediately uploading it to my secure offshore vault. I looked at my father one last time. He was still laughing, completely blind to the slaughterhouse Marcus was leading him toward. The pain of my family's betrayal was a living, breathing thing inside my chest, but I shoved it down into a dark, cold box and locked it tight. I turned my back on the glittering ballroom and slipped out into the cold night air. The final pieces of my digital death dossier were falling perfectly into place. Marcus thought he was the master manipulator playing a grand game of chess. He was about to find out that I controlled the entire board. The heavy, humid air of the cramped motel room felt even more suffocating when the sharp, authoritative knock rattled the flimsy wooden door. I paused my data extraction, minimizing the terminal windows on my laptop, and walked quietly to the peephole. Standing on the exterior walkway, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of a broken street lamp, was Marcus. He was clutching a bouquet of wilted white lilies, his face contorted into a mask of profound, weary sorrow. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. Marcus did not wait for an invitation. He stepped inside, letting his eyes roam over the peeling wallpaper and the stained carpet with an expression of manufactured pity. "Taylor," he murmured, his voice thick with a carefully rehearsed melancholy. "Look at how you are living. This breaks my heart. You do not have to do this to yourself." I stood entirely still, my face a blank canvas. "Why are you here, Marcus?" He sighed heavily, placing the cheap lilies on the dusty nightstand. He took a step closer, adopting the gentle, condescending tone of a parent speaking to a deeply confused child. "I am here because I still love you. Despite the abuse, despite your erratic outbursts and the absolute chaos you have brought into our home, I want to help you find peace. I know the pressure at Aegis Core Solutions is what triggered this entire mental collapse. The long hours, the constant stress, it has completely destroyed your mind." He reached into his tailored jacket and pulled out a thick stack of legal documents, placing them gently on the edge of the sagging bed. "I had my attorneys draft these," he continued, his eyes radiating a toxic, suffocating warmth. "It is a complete transfer of your corporate assets and equity shares over to my name. If you sign this, you can finally let go of the burden. You can step away from the stress that is making you so sick. I am willing to forgive all the pain you have caused me. Taylor, just sign the papers, and I will take care of everything." My eyes drifted from the predatory legal documents up to his face, and then, inevitably, to his chest. There, barely visible beneath the thin fabric of his shirt pocket, was the faint, rhythmic pulse of a tiny blue light. It was a digital recording pen. The entire visit, the flowers, the gentle tone, it was all a meticulously designed trap. He had come here explicitly to push my buttons, hoping to capture me screaming, throwing things, or violently rejecting his absurd offer. He needed fresh audio evidence of my hostility to solidify the legal narrative of my insanity. A cold, sharp clarity washed over my brain. He wanted a performance. I decided to give him an Oscar-winning one. I forced my shoulders to slump, letting my chin tremble slightly. I drew in a ragged, shallow breath, squeezing my eyes shut until hot, genuine tears of absolute exhaustion and suppressed rage spilled over my eyelashes. When I opened my eyes, I looked at him with the shattered, desperate expression of a woman who had finally been broken. "You are right," I sobbed, letting my voice crack and pitch upward in a pathetic wail. "You are completely right. Marcus, I have been losing my mind. The pressure, the paranoia. I do not even know what is real anymore. I am so sorry for everything I have done to you. I have been so awful, so unstable. Marcus stiffened for a fraction of a second, clearly caught off guard by my total surrender. But his massive ego quickly overpowered his caution. A sickening glint of pure triumph flashed in his eyes. I collapsed onto the edge of the mattress, burying my face in my hands, weeping loudly into the quiet room. "I cannot trust my own brain," I cried out, ensuring my voice was loud and clear for the hidden microphone. "I need help. I need you to make the decisions for me. I am a danger to myself and everyone else. Just tell me what to do. Marcus, I will do whatever you and my family think is best. I just want the pain to stop." He placed a reassuring hand on my trembling shoulder, the physical contact making my skin crawl with intense revulsion. "Shh, it is going to be all right, Taylor," he crooned, his voice dripping with victorious satisfaction. "I am going to get you the professional isolation you need." He did not push me to sign the papers right then. He already had exactly what he came for. He left the room shortly after, his footsteps light and eager on the concrete walkway outside. Exactly 45 minutes later, my phone screen lit up on the nightstand. It was a text message from my father. Marcus had undoubtedly forwarded the audio file the second he got into his car, weaponizing my fabricated confession. The message from Arthur read, "I am so deeply sorry, Taylor, but you need to be isolated so you do not hurt anyone else. This Friday, Marcus will take you to a secure residential treatment facility. It is for your own good." I stared at the glowing words, the final nail in the coffin of my family's loyalty. The betrayal was complete, absolute, and finalized. I wiped the remaining fake tears from my cheeks, my face hardening into a mask of pure, calculated ice. I picked up the phone and typed my response, my thumbs flying across the digital keyboard with lethal precision. "I agree," I replied. "I know I'm sick, but before I go away, please let me have one final farewell dinner with everyone on Thursday evening at your house." The response came back 2 minutes later. "Okay, Thursday evening." I set the phone down and turned back to my encrypted laptop. The trap was officially set. They thought they were gathering to bid farewell to a madwoman. They had no idea they had just confirmed their attendance for their own digital execution. The clock immediately began counting down. For the next 48 hours, I did not sleep, and I barely ate. I transformed that suffocating, nicotine-stained motel room into a highly classified digital command center. My objective was terrifyingly simple. I needed to build a fortress of truth that no slick attorney or desperate husband could ever dismantle. I established an independent, completely untraceable offshore server, routing the encrypted connection through a complex labyrinth of proxy chains spanning 3 different continents. Into this impenetrable digital vault, I meticulously uploaded the entire autopsy of Marcus and his deceit, every single high-resolution photograph of the secluded luxury mansion he bought for Elena, every forged psychiatric evaluation, every offshore wire transfer receipt, and the damning audio file from the charity gala was securely locked away. I even established automated deadman switches in the code. If anything happened to me, or if my devices were somehow seized, the server was programmed to mass distribute the files to every major news outlet and law enforcement agency in the state of North Carolina. Once the digital trap was flawlessly set, I moved out of the shadows and into the corporate realm. Using a secure, encrypted line, I initiated a covert conference call with the executive legal team at Aegis Core Solutions. As a senior cybersecurity architect holding substantial stock options, any threat to my equity was a direct, actionable threat to the company and its financial stability. When I presented the encrypted evidence of Marcus executing an elaborate scheme to forge medical power of attorney documents and commit massive financial fraud, our corporate attorneys did not just offer their sympathy, they offered utter annihilation. Operating entirely behind closed doors, they drafted a comprehensive criminal dossier detailing multiple counts of aggravated wire fraud, identity theft, and severe forgery. They strategically liaised with the Financial Crimes Division of the state police, ensuring the legal net was tightly woven before my husband even realized he was bleeding. When Thursday evening finally arrived, the humid Carolina air felt incredibly thick with impending destruction. I parked my car in the familiar, manicured driveway of my father's sprawling suburban home, taking a slow, measured breath. I smoothed the fabric of my conservative navy dress and walked through the heavy front door. The atmosphere inside the dining room was instantly suffocating. The massive mahogany table was set perfectly for four, but the heavy silence hanging over the room felt exactly like a funeral wake. My father, Arthur, sat at the head of the table, avoiding my gaze completely. He focused intently on cutting his roast beef, the sharp scrape of his silver knife echoing loudly against the fine porcelain plates. Chloe sat directly across from me, her eyes darting nervously toward my face before quickly dropping back to her lap. She looked at me with a sickening mixture of fear and profound pity, as if she fully expected me to shatter a plate or start screaming at the walls at any given moment. And then there was Marcus. He had positioned himself at the exact center of the long table, commanding the room with the quiet, tragic authority of a martyr. He wore a crisp, light blue button-down shirt, looking freshly showered and perfectly relaxed. The agonizing tension in the room clearly fueled him. He was actively basking in the absolute control he had secured over my family, playing the role of the benevolent savior to absolute perfection. As the agonizingly quiet meal drew to a close, Marcus leaned back in his heavy wooden chair. He reached for his expensive crystal wine glass, filling it halfway with a dark, rich Merlot. He cleared his throat, a soft, deliberate sound, designed to draw every single eye in the room directly to him. My father stopped eating. Chloe folded her hands tightly, holding her breath. Marcus raised his glass in the air, angling it gently toward me. His eyes were wide and swimming with a flawlessly manufactured compassion that made my stomach churn violently. "Taylor," Marcus began, his voice a smooth, velvety purr of calculated manipulation. "I know these past few weeks have been an absolute nightmare for all of us, but tonight is about looking forward. We are doing this because we love you deeply. I want to propose a toast to your speedy recovery, and to you finally finding your reason again." My father nodded solemnly, slowly raising his own glass. Chloe followed suit, her hand trembling slightly as she lifted her drink. I looked at the three of them, my pulse beating a slow, steady rhythm in my ears like a war drum. I did not reach for my glass. Instead, I allowed a small, perfectly gentle smile to curve the edges of my lips. It was a smile completely devoid of warmth, like the winter sun reflecting off a frozen dead lake. "Thank you, Marcus," I replied quietly. I slowly reached into the pocket of my dress and pulled out my smartphone. Without breaking eye contact with my husband, I tapped a single, pre-programmed widget on my home screen. A silent digital command shot through the local wireless network, instantly hijacking the massive 75-inch smart television mounted on the wall directly behind my father. The giant screen flared to life, illuminating the dim dining room with a stark, blinding white light. "Before I go," I said, my voice dropping into a flat, completely emotionless register that immediately froze the air in the room. "I have a short video I want our family to watch, just a little memory." The harsh white light of the 75-inch screen shifted, but it did not display a nostalgic family vacation or a heartwarming wedding montage. Instead, the display filled with a massive, high-definition spreadsheet. The headers were highlighted in bright, aggressive red. The rows detailed dozens of continuous wire transfers, each moving tens of thousands of dollars out of my joint investment portfolio directly into an offshore account explicitly registered to Elena. My father's silver fork clattered loudly against his porcelain plate, the sound ringing out like a gunshot in the silent room. Chloe squinted at the glowing numbers, her brow furrowing in deep confusion. Before anyone could speak, the screen transitioned. A scanned legal document appeared, expanding to fill the entire display. It was the commercial lien against my late mother's 50 acres of land. securing a fraudulent business loan of $2 million. The camera zoomed in heavily on the bottom of the page, magnifying the flawless forgery of my signature for everyone to see. The blood instantly drained from Marcus's face, leaving him looking like a pale, terrified ghost. The benevolent savior act shattered into a million pieces. "Turn that off!" he bellowed, his voice cracking with sheer panic. He scrambled out of his chair so violently that it tipped over and crashed onto the hardwood floor. He lunged toward the wall, desperately grabbing at the back of the television to rip the power cord from the socket. He was too late. I tapped a second widget on my phone, instantly locking the television's operating system and overriding the audio output. The screen went black, but the surround sound speakers hidden in the ceiling roared to life. The crisp, high-quality audio recording from the charity gala flooded the dining room. "The old man is incredibly useful," Marcus's recorded voice echoed, dripping with pure, unadulterated contempt. He practically begged me to take them. My father physically recoiled, sinking back into his chair as if he had just taken a heavy punch to the chest. Then came Elena's sharp, grating giggle. "And the sister? Is she still crying over the poor, deranged wife?" "Chloe is the easiest target of them all," the recording continued, filling the room with the ugly, naked truth. "I tell her Taylor is crazy, and she instantly writes the script in her own head. They are so eager to avoid a family scandal that they eat right out of my hand." The recording stopped. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, and suffocating. The meticulously constructed illusion was entirely dead. My father stared at Marcus, his mouth open, his eyes wide with a horrifying realization of his own foolishness. Chloe brought her hands up to cover her face, letting out a sharp, choked gasp of pure horror. Marcus turned around to face me, breathing heavily. The mask was completely gone. In its place was a cornered, rabid animal, his charming features contorted into a mask of pure, unfiltered rage. His hands curled into tight fists. "You stupid, arrogant," he snarled, taking a massive, threatening step toward me. He raised his arm, entirely prepared to strike me right there in my father's dining room. Before he could close the distance, the blaring, chaotic wail of police sirens pierced the quiet suburban evening. Striking bursts of red and blue light flashed violently through the large dining room windows, painting Marcus's furious face in alternating colors. Heavy, authoritative pounding rattled the heavy front door. Police Financial Crimes Division opened the door. My corporate attorneys had timed the execution perfectly. My father, moving like a completely broken man, stumbled into the hallway and unlocked the front door. 4 heavily armed state investigators rushed into the house. They did not ask questions. They took one look at Marcus, matched his face to the felony arrest warrants in their hands, and moved in. Marcus tried to step back, but 2 officers immediately grabbed his arms, spinning him around and slamming him forcefully against the mahogany dining table. The metallic clink of steel handcuffs snapping shut around his wrists was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. "Marcus Sutherland, you are under arrest for multiple counts of aggravated wire fraud, grand larceny, and felony forgery," the lead detective announced, reading him his rights as Marcus thrashed wildly, screaming my name and cursing my existence. They dragged him out of the house. The heavy front door slammed shut behind them, leaving the 3 of us standing in the wreckage of his lies. My father collapsed into his chair. He buried his face in his trembling hands, sobbing openly. "Taylor," he wept, his voice completely broken by shame and regret. "My God, Taylor, what have we done? I am so sorry. I am so terribly sorry." Chloe rushed around the table, falling to her knees right beside me. Tears streamed down her face, ruining her makeup. "We did not know," she cried, reaching out to grab my hand. "Please, Taylor, you have to forgive us. We were completely blinded." I looked down at my sister, and then over at my weeping father. I gently, but firmly, pulled my hand out of Chloe's grasp. I did not scream at them. I did not hurl insults. I simply did not feel the need to comfort the people who had so willingly packed my bags and prepared to lock me away in a psychiatric ward to save their own social standing. "I forgive you," I said softly, my voice calm and completely detached. "But I will never forget how easily you let him convince you that I was broken." I turned my back on them, picked up my purse, and walked out of the house. The cool night air hit my face, clean and incredibly refreshing. I walked down the driveway with my head held high, leaving the ruins of that toxic dynamic far behind me. Months later, the dust finally settled. Marcus pleaded guilty to avoid a drawn-out federal trial and was sentenced to 8 years in a state penitentiary. The moment his bank accounts were frozen by the federal authorities, Elena vanished, abandoning the secluded mansion and leaving him to face the absolute destruction of his life entirely alone. As for me, I rebuilt everything. I secured a massive promotion at Aegis Core Solutions, completely unburdened by the parasitic weight of a deceitful husband. I eventually reconnected with my father and sister, but the dynamic was forever changed. I maintained strict, impenetrable boundaries. They were family, but they would never again be allowed full access to my inner sanctuary. I had learned the hardest lesson of my life, but I emerged from the fire entirely whole, entirely independent, and completely untouchable. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. Where are you tuning in from right now? Please let me know in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, please consider supporting our channel with just $1. You can scan the QR code on your screen or use the donation link in the description or the pinned comment. Your support allows us to pay our hardworking team, helping them provide for their families while continuing to create more amazing stories for you. Have a wonderful day.